Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and it's 2024. And while the year started out pretty bare snow-wise, we here in the Pacific Northwest are supposed to be getting 2 feet this weekend. So while the parks at the summit at Snoqualmie have been fun, it's time to get back to skiing soft snow, and I'm excited about that. What I'm not excited about is that since November 2nd, I've gained 18 pounds. Now, those of you familiar with my weight story over the past few years, I'll kind of sum it up for you really quick. I did a beer drinking challenge right around when the pandemic started, and I was drinking at least 1 beer a day, probably a lot more, against other people, and I was putting on weight. And when I got to be 190 pounds, and at that time I used to weigh about 170 pounds, I realized that I was getting pretty fat, and I felt out of shape, and I needed to do something about it. So I started riding the shit out of my Peloton and taking Nema vitamins, and that really helped me lose 40 pounds. I did that in about a year. I got down to 150 pounds. But my mom came into town, and she was here for a month, and that was so awesome. But we went out to dinner almost every night that she was here. I think that must have accounted for 10 pounds of the new weight that I've gained. And then the holidays put on the other 8 pounds. So my New Year's resolution this year is to cut out sweets during the week and do the whole sober January thing, which is really, really easy for me due to my unlimited supply of Best Day Brewing products. If you haven't tried Best Day, I highly recommend it. And I will say that I've been doing this for a week, and 1 week into the new year, I'm already down about 6 pounds. So things are working. Not drinking and not eating sugar really does help you lose weight. Why am I boring you with my diet? Well, I have no idea, really. I should be telling you about my guests this week. But honestly, I did this interview over a month ago, and while I know it was a good one, I barely remember it because I've done like 6 or 7 interviews since then. But Parkin Costain is a name that if you're not familiar with it, you're going to be hearing it a lot more in the future. Really, you should know his name. Between filming with TGR and winning the King of Corbets, his name has been out there a bunch. And this podcast, well, I know you're going to like it. I just can't remember it. But I can remember to ask you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, review me there too, and while you're at it, follow me on my Instagram page, The Powell Movement. All these things really do help the show grow, and that's important to me. And that's important to the incredible brands that make this show happen. They are Elan Skis, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Outdoor Research, and Best Day Brewing. Now, let's talk with Parkin Costain. I think we should start this thing out by talking about your dad, because before you existed, your dad was living the pro snowboarder life. And can you give us an overview of his career, like who he rode for and what videos he was in?
Honestly, I feel like you might know more about his pro snowboard career than I do. I definitely remember there's some posters laying around the house of him up on the wall, doing some big slash turns. Beautiful Montana scenery, but he definitely did that all before I was born. And then as soon as I was born, he transitioned into skiing and then brought me up doing that. But yeah, he was a writer for magazines, and I remember he got to travel to Lofoten, Norway, and go on some really cool backcountry adventures, but I don't know much more besides that. Do you have any other beta?
I was looking at the Transworld exposure meter from 2000, and he was the 96th most popular snowboarder in terms of exposure in Transworld, Snowboarder magazine, and all the different magazines put together. There was way more than 100 snowboarders at that time. So he definitely was getting exposure, I would think, in every issue back then. So he had a little bit of a pro career, right?
Yeah, he certainly did. And that's such a funny statistic. I had never heard that one specifically, but I remember him bragging a little bit when I was a kid about how back when mountain biking was first becoming a thing, he was on a couple of race circuits. And at one point or another, he was judged 23rd best in the world or something for mountain biking as well.
That's very high up in the mountain bike world if you were to get that. But with these exposure meters, back in the day before you were even born, these things called magazines, they were the fixture of what skiing and snowboarding had media-wise. There was the movies every year, but those magazines would come out with an exposure meter, especially on the snowboard side more than skiing, and they would tally up how many editorial pieces you had, how many advertisements you had, and you would kind of get a score, and your dad was 96th in 2000, which is better than you've ever been on the snowboard list, so that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's unreal. No, I'm psyched to hear that. Thanks for sleuthing that out of the internet.
And then you brought up mountain biking, and he was the 23rd best in mountain biking. With your dad being a pro snowboarder, him being a pro mountain biker, was there other pro athletes that you just grew up calling Uncle John and stuff when you were growing up?
Unfortunately, our whole family is not pro athletes, but definitely my dad was just like such a prominent figure in the way I grew up. And he certainly like guided me on the path to becoming who I am now, and definitely knew all the like right little steps to take and was able to point me in the right direction when it came to reaching out to brands and trying to sound professional at a young age. So I definitely think he helped a ton.
Yeah, and I mean, his mountain biking title is the godfather of whitefish mountain biking. And when you think about what the family did for money growing up, is biking pretty much the family income? Your dad fixing and building bike trails?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I grew up here in Whitefish, Montana, back here for Thanksgiving right now. And my dad was a snow reporter actually originally at Bridger Bowl for a winter. And then they moved up to Whitefish. I ended up being born, and then kind of they just hunkered down. And he became a snowcat driver up at the hill, made snow for years. And then later on in life, started a little construction company with some dump trucks, and then tried to turn a passion into a career and started digging mountain bike trails when I was like 11 or 12 years old. And then since then, TerraFlow Trails has been like the prominent family income and now turned into a pretty successful little business.
How about your mom? What's her athletic background?
My parents, they met in Mammoth actually back in the day. And I think she was a ski instructor and then became a nurse as she moved up here to Montana. And have vivid memories of riding around on mountain bikes with her on like double black gnarly trails when I was younger. And while my dad was out building trails, we were riding with my mom on some of the gnarly stuff at the hill. So she was definitely an unreal mother figure and was super accepting of all the like gnarly adrenaline we were trying to chase at a young age. And yeah, super, super supportive family atmosphere.
Both of your parents, they both like to get after it. When they had you and then eventually had your brother, did they have to sacrifice much, or did they just pretty much put you into their lifestyle and it's like, figure it out, kid, because this is how we live?
Yeah, it definitely was more of like funnel us into their lifestyle rather than change what they had going on too much. Like as a young kid, my dad would still go out on these pretty big expeditions. And I remember often getting worried, probably because of my mom expressing her concern every once in a while, just because like, I'll be back at 6, honey. And then he's not back till like 10 p.m. And he tells us this huge story when he gets home about how they got lost for a little bit and then found their way back to the car, and that he's sorry, but he'll be back earlier next time. And I definitely grew up with that mentality a lot around the household, and it was funny to see the way that they just like funneled us into it. When it came to me getting a little bit older and being able to like start to charge a bit more, I remember there was a vivid 4th grade class memory I had where I heard my dad and a couple of his buddies were going up to Kicking Horse Mountain Resort on like an all guys trip. And I had not been up to Canada to like ski at that point. And I was like, Dad, I really want to go. And I was literally in 4th grade.
Right.
And we were going up the chairlift, and he just was like, all right, guys, like he's with his buddies they're going on the trip with. He's like, I have a proposition. If Parkin can beat us down the mountain, would it be okay if he came with us on this trip? And I was 100% game. But those guys were a little bit like weary and not sure if that was going to be a good call or not. And got to the top of the hill, and he just said, whatever. And all of us bombed down this hill. And I definitely did not have like any technical ability, but just pointed it down this mogul field below the chair and made it to the bottom before any of these like 35, 40-year-old dudes did. And I wasn't sure at that point if I was going to get the invite to the trip, but I have an epic memory of going through 4th grade class, and my dad rolls up at lunch one time and it's just like, all right, we're leaving right now. You coming? And yeah, that was a super solid memory.
That's pretty amazing. And then just your name, Parkin. Whenever I hear it, I think of Harkin Banks just because that's a ski name and it's a very unique name that you have. Is it a family name? Does it come from the movie? How do you get that name?
Yeah, so my brother's name is Lad. And I think I was originally supposed to be named Lad. And my mom was like in labor is the story I've heard. And my dad was just like looking through a book or something and he found this, or I don't know exactly where it came from. I do think it has like potentially it might mean young Peter, and my dad's name's Peter. So that was one story I'd heard. And then another one that I've heard from a couple people from like England is it's a type of gingerbread, but I have no clue where they got it. I'm definitely into it though.
So you've got this unique name, and one thing I heard about when I talk to people about you is that you're one of those kids that are good at everything that you do, whether it's skiing, biking. I guess you can hold your own on a POW surfer and a snowboard as well. What else do you consider yourself pretty good at?
My brother and I are avid car enthusiasts, and not that I've like got any sort of career going in that direction yet, but definitely keen to try to like branch out into that as the years progress. And I don't know. Yeah, I've just always been excited to be an amateur at things and then really love the process of learning. So like whether or not I suck right away, I promise you I'll get better fairly quickly. And I just enjoy the process of learning.
Well, it sounds like you can only get better at driving from age 12 because it sounds like you had your first big car accident at 12 years old. What happened?
Are you referring to the time I drove into the back of my dad's truck and like ripped off the bumper on our Subaru?
I guess I am. I just heard you were in a car accident at 12 years old, but it sounds like there might be two.
There's multiple moments, I think, at a young age. I was definitely trying to get behind the wheel at a young age. And one time, there's two different times, there's multiple different times, but it's all with this like old Subaru that we used to have. And I don't know what it was at a young age. I was just like super, super keen on trying to get behind the wheel. And one time we were in a parking lot. My dad like went into a hardware store, and I was probably like 6 at this point, honestly. And I didn't know what the e-brake was, but we were like parked on a slope, and we released the handbrake, my brother and I, in the car, and then just realized we started rolling backwards, and there was like a Jeep parked behind us in a parking lot. And these two big dudes jump out of it and then caught the car, and then one reached in the window and like put the e-brake back on, and my brother and I are totally oblivious to what almost just happened.
No way.
And then in that same car, like a couple years later, we were in the driveway, and I was trying to figure out how to drive. My dad's like, all right, just go really slow. There's throttle and brake. And I was just trying to put it in a parking spot, and ended up plowing into the back of my dad's truck with the hitch that ripped the bumper off because I didn't know where the brake was.
A budding trail builder at that time has to be pretty frustrated when both of his cars are in an accident together.
Yeah. My parents never get too bummed. They're definitely like, that's the way of life, and just trying to like teach us life lessons along the way. But he definitely was not stoked when that happened.
How about when you got the worst speeding ticket ever? I hear there's a good story behind your worst speeding ticket.
Dude, that one is totally ridiculous because I wasn't even speeding. Like, I'm known to drive quickly, but this one instance, like, I was not doing anything illegal. I was driving through West Yellowstone, going from Big Sky to Jackson Hole for an avalanche workshop in like early December. And I even have a radar detector in my car because, you know, you just got to make sure the cops are being truthful. And was literally driving the speed limit through the park, and slowly was catching up to this vehicle, which was a sheriff, and it was like a West Yellowstone, like National Park Police or whatever.
Ranger guy.
Ranger dude. And then whole situation made no sense. I followed this dude through the park for a while, but slowly caught up to him because he was going slower than the speed limit. And then he pulled out into a pullout, and then I exited the park, and then was like a mile down the road from there. And then there was another pullout, and he just like ripped up behind me, the same dude that let me pass him throughout the park. And then just instantly threatened to impound my vehicle, and then said I was speeding at like 80 miles an hour through the park. And I had literally been following him for like miles. And then I was just so taken back by his demeanor that I thought maybe my car is about to get impounded. I'm not going to make it to Jackson for this event. But fortunately, like, talked him down. And then he threatened to give me a reckless driving ticket and impound my car. Eventually ended up just saying, I'll pay the ticket and like, let me go, please. And I did pay the ticket. And then it turns out that there's interns throughout the summer or throughout the year that work for the national park that go to some like local community colleges. And I got a call like a year later that there was a warrant out for my arrest because I had never paid this speeding ticket. And I have like record of paying it with my mom that year prior. And then the same dude that got super pissed at me and said he was going to impound my car now said that my license was suspended and that there's a warrant for my arrest and that I have to pay this ticket. And I was like, dude, I've paid this. I don't know what's going on. And supposedly one of the interns that was supposed to file the paperwork after I did so just didn't, and I had to repay the ticket. So it was a conundrum, but we made it through.
Well, you can't always trust the interns to do the best job. That's why they're not employees. That's why they're interns, and that sucks for you. But you're not a rally car racer at this point in our story. You're growing up in Whitefish, Montana. And based on that family history we talked about, you were really born into this lifestyle. Like, while most people have parents that were great skiers at one point, most of them move on with life. But as we established, your folks are still living the life. Does that mean your schooling is different than most kids you knew? Did you go to a regular public high school, or were you homeschooled? How did that work?
Yeah, so typically just like did the normal school thing up until the beginning of high school, and started at that point trying to do half days. And I was just traveling so much that the school was a little bit hard to work with. And that at that point, there wasn't too, like, there was a ski community, but there weren't any like up and coming shredders that seemed like they wanted to pursue it professionally around here yet. So the school was just like not aware that that was even a possibility as like a young kid being able to pursue these careers. And I remember trying to get all the work done prior to leaving on trips where I'd go and compete. And they would be so harsh on me because they didn't really understand what I was doing. But then if I would have been just like one of the football players or basketball players, they had no problem with those kids just leaving and barely getting the work done. Yeah, there was definitely a few instances where I was just like, this is so ridiculous. I need to start doing my own program. So I started homeschooling and then finished off high school with like 3 years of online school. And yeah, from there, just jumped straight into a ski career.
Before you even get to high school, when you're just like first through fifth grade-ish, because you enter contests early on, like at like 7 to 10 years old, you're competing in free ride contests where most kids don't even know those things exist. How does that even happen for you, that you get pushed into free ride contests early on? Or did you want to do it and someone just suggested it? How did that all work out?
Yeah, so definitely was just known as like one of these kids that shredded around on the local hill. And there was a couple standout names locally back when I was growing up. One of them was Mitch Gilman, and he was an absolute shredder. He helped me get one of my first sponsors, and he was on the Line Pro team.
Okay.
And he was a couple years older than I was. He was an insane athlete and had a super supportive family that then decided maybe it'd be cool if I went to one of these events with them up in Canada. So I think Red Mountain IFSA was the first free ride contest that I got to be a part of. And yeah, kind of went to a few of them that season and was 7 or 8 years old in the 7 to 11 category and was able to ski well, but didn't, I don't think, place once, and definitely just like lit the fire for the next season. And I was super young, but my parents were supportive and down to bring me up to some of these contests. And I think the next year I ended up winning like every single one of the free ride contests that we joined. And then that just like started the evolution of where I was starting to head throughout my ski career. And at like literally, 9, I just had decided like, this is what I want to do, and had never thought anything else other than just going to compete until the 15 to 18-year-old categories eventually came onto the scene. And just really young kids started competing and found my way young, I guess.
When you're that young and you're competing in big mountain contests, I'm guessing that when you're not going weekend to different contests, you're heading out in the backcountry with your dad, your mom, your brother. Are you learning the risks of the backcountry from when you're like 7 years old and on? Are they teaching you different things while you're out there?
Certainly. My dad was always super, like, he was just like the greatest teacher I ever could have had, because at a young age, he would bring me into the backcountry at 7 years old. And like every year was just learning more and more and how to interpret the terrain and trying to figure out what was considered avalanche terrain, what was like a convex rollover, and how to dig snow pits and kind of like assess the terrain you're in. So it was really, I think at a young age, it was key to my development as trying to become comfortable in the backcountry. And yeah, definitely give all that props to my dad, because I don't think many other fathers are taking their like 7-year-old kids out backcountry freeride skiing.
No, and then it makes me think there's a lot of firsts in the backcountry. Like, do you remember the first time you had to take a mandatory air out of something just to get out of the line? And does that create a fear in your head when you're little? Or is it like your dad tricks you with candy? Or how does he make you do those things at such a young age?
Yeah, there's actually a video of like, it wasn't a mandatory air out, but it was a mandatory just follow my tracks from my dad. And there was this sick line near Fernie, BC, where we were ripping. Yeah, I was probably eight or 9, and hiked up this ridge, and we're like skiing some backcountry. And my dad was like, "Yeah, just follow my tracks. There's going to be like a little mandatory air at the bottom of this, and be confident, you got this." And yeah, I followed him up, and then didn't even have radios at that point. He's like, "Yeah, just wait like 30 seconds and drop in," and had this super fun skiing. And then all of a sudden just followed his tracks off this pretty prominent hit. It was probably like 20 or 30 feet and stomped it. And then that was just like such a rad moment. I threw my arms up in the air. I was just like, yeah, so psyched. And yeah, that was definitely a prominent moment.
And then with the way that you're raised, you and your brother, I read a bunch of different things, and the word free range was used a lot. When I think of that, I think parents just letting their kids off near the hill. It's just like, hey, be home by when the lifts close, and kind of let you do whatever you want. Was that kind of your childhood? Like once you hit the 8, 9 years old, was your dad and mom like going out and skiing by themselves and letting you and your brother go shred yourselves as well?
Yeah, like if it was the local hill, they had no problem at 7, 8, 9 years old, just letting my brother and I go up and do our thing. But they definitely weren't just like completely obsolete. Like they fully parented us all the way until still currently, but they had no problem letting us do our own things and trying to like see how we figured it out. And it's definitely something that as I get older and I like imagine having kids one day, I see as like feeling a little weird just letting a little Grom go out and do that. But I'm super fortunate that they did let us do that.
Were there many rules for you growing up, or were they total like hippie style, have fun, if there's consequences, we'll figure that out then?
Yeah, it certainly is. If there's consequences, we're going to figure it out down the road. But yeah, there's not nearly as many rules as most other families, I think.
Okay. And then one thing about being a kid is other sports, and most kids aren't just into skiing. Do you have anything else or any other passions in life that you're focused on, or is it just skiing?
Skiing and mountain biking are prominent. And then I played a tiny bit of like school sports when I was younger, a little bit of lacrosse and football, but I think my ball handling skills, dude, they're just so subpar. I was the kicker on the football team, but when it came time to like catch the ball or something, I was atrocious. And then also have this horrible memory of playing lacrosse, and our team was already pretty bad, but I was one of the worst players. And I could like capture the ball and get it across the field, no problem. But the other team had like built up their confidence so much because we were such a horrible, we had like 0 points and they had like 15, that the goalie on the other team left and tried to score in our net. And then I got the ball from him and ran all the way back to their goal and threw the ball at the goal, except I missed by like 15 feet and there wasn't even a goal in the net.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break. And for over 75 years, Elan Skis has been building world-class skis in the Slovenian Alps. It's real skiers building skis with the highest quality materials in the world. And I'm not just saying that. Elan is not only known for skis, they also build luxury yachts, so there's no cutting corners on anything. It's all about delivering the best on-mountain experience to skiers all over the world. And while Elan has been killing it in Europe for decades, over the past 10 years, they've been building a cult following here in the States because it's hard not to love a playful ski that's rock solid underfoot and a ski that makes you a better skier. Their award-winning Ripstick line has proven time and again to do this and has a waist width for everyone, but that's not all Elan has to offer. Their brand new Playmaker series in waist widths of 101 and 91 have won all the awards, and they're the perfect tools for landing switch in the park or backcountry. So please do me and yourself a favor. The next time you demo a ski, try Elan and ski what I'm talking about. You can find out more about Elan over at elanskis.com. Next up is where I want you to buy your Elan skis from. Peter Glenn Ski & Sports have been getting people on the snow since 1958. They aren't one of the newer internet companies trying to take over the world with product lines and hotels. They do one thing, get you dialed in with the right gear for your adventure or vacation. They take pride in being the best at that. And whether you're experiencing the best-in-class retail experience or the 5-star rated website based on the almost 13,000 reviews they have, Peter Glenn has all the brands, all the products, and if you can't get the Peter Glenn experience in person, well, their website offers free shipping on orders over $49, a hassle-free return policy, and they'll price match. That's right. If you find something cheaper at a reputable dealer, contact Peter Glenn, let them know, and they'll match that price. If you like this podcast, please do that for me. To find out more about all things Peter Glenn Ski & Sports, head on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, a brand located right down the street from me here in Seattle, and the only brand I trust to keep my drinks hotter and colder than anyone else. Stanley is the best at this. I mean, they invented the category, and they are the all-inclusive brand that wants to outfit everyone's adventures. Stanley isn't going to sell you a $300 cooler. What they are going to do is offer you best-in-class product for a reasonable price. And these days, with ski resorts charging $30 for a burger, there's never been a better time to load up on Stanley's food storage supplies and save your family a lot of money by bringing your home-cooked goodness to the mountains, whether you like them piping hot or ice cold. Stanley delivers. And while Stanley always offers a code for the best possible discounts to Powell Movement listeners, there won't be a code for the next couple weeks as Stanley has its holiday deals live on its website, and you can save up to 60% off select items. To get the deals and find out more about all things Stanley, head on over to stanley1913.com and go shopping. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you're a kid and you're skiing, I feel like it creates the ability to take some real chances because kids' bones are like rubber and you don't think you're really going to get hurt until you get hurt that first time. Do you remember the first serious injury you had and what an impact it had on you afterwards?
One thing that's odd about me is I've definitely been like a really calculated individual even as a kid. I haven't until recently have any ski injuries. I'd had hit my head a few times, but the classic knees or shoulders and broken bones. Fortunately, I'd not managed to do any of that.
Well, how about close calls? What's the worst thing you've experienced in the backcountry, whether you were a kid or even up until now?
The closest calls have been regarding avalanches in the past few seasons where you do everything right, but then trying to film for these movies and a little bit added pressures of the sun is here. We've got a 2-day window. We got to go and ski. You make all the right calls you possibly can, but something still definitely can go wrong. And in 2020, the backflip over the avalanche clip, which definitely stood out, but it was not on purpose. And
right.
Then this year up in Alaska with TGR, I did a similar thing where I ended up flipping and had skied this line once and train was sick. Decided I wanted to go back up and do a flip, and the sun had just been on the slope for the few minutes longer. And as I took off, I think from the prior takeoff, the snow had compacted onto a different aspect after I took off, and it had a little bit more heat on it for the next 20 minutes as I went back up to ski it again.
Yep.
And I went into the air, and as I was rotating around, staring at the landing, I could see just this massive propagation into a huge slide, and I landed in it and then was able to straight line and air out the bottom. But I'm not really hoping to do that ever again because now it's 2-0, so don't want it to go the opposite way.
Yeah, I think it's good to keep luck on your side and minimize the risk when you can, but your job, it's a high-risk thing. And before we even talk more into that, thinking more about your childhood, there's the ski culture side of things too. And if your dad grew up in the snowboard world, I'm sure he's well versed in snowboard culture, and he was probably getting you into ski culture as well. Did you grow up watching ski movies and watching the X Games? And what kind of things got you fired up to go skiing?
Definitely going to the ski premieres every fall. Like I have vivid memories. Like this year was such a full circle moment because I have such vivid memories of going to the local TGR films here in the fall and having like Sage and Ian stand out in these massive AK segments towards the end of the film. And then this year getting the opportunity to go up there and ski with those guys on a TGR trip was just like such an insane moment. But yeah, that, and then watching X Games, and then also one of my best friends, Maggie Voisin, was like a huge inspiration because we both grew up together, and then her career in the park scene exploded way earlier than mine did. And yeah, watching her be able to like do skiing as a living was super incredible and definitely inspired me to keep going.
I mean, when you think about her skiing is pretty much based on park skiing and based on medals at X Games and going to the Olympics. And you guys were skiing together when you were like 7, 8 years old. Were you part of a ski program with her? And were you like focused on the park for a little while?
Yeah, like locally, we don't really have a park here in White. Like we do, but nothing stand out. And we were on the freestyle team together, which kind of just evolved into like a shred around the mountain team. Yeah, literally from like 7 years old on, we were skiing every day together until she left to Park City at like 13 years old. And yeah, there was a couple sick moments where she had just come from figure skating and was all into spinning and was like super capable. And we were on the local freestyle jump hill. And I remember one day there was like this contest between her and I on trying to get our first 720s. And I was definitely competing on the local little freestyle scene here, but never traveled around to any major events.
So it's pretty cool that you grow up with her and you're able to be exposed to that side of skiing, because I would think if she's not around and not spinning all the time, then you're going to be focused on more big mountain skiing with the cool kids in that program. But you're into the culture, you're living the lifestyle, and really, you kind of mentioned it earlier on, but you got on the line flow program in like 5th grade. And is it Mitch who makes a phone call and gets you on, or are you harassing the line guys? Or is it Josh Malchek who's putting you on? How does that all work?
Yeah, I think Josh, he was definitely still involved at that point, but it was just the local rep. And then I remember like shedding a couple tears in school because I got like the phone call and I was at lunch in 5th grade. And then they were like, yeah, we're going to help you out with some product this winter. And I was like, no way. But yeah, that was all through Mitch Gilman and his dad. And then they just introed me via email and then showed him what I was getting up to the next seasons and how I'm trying to go and compete. So they were super supportive at a young age. And I think I skied with them for like 6, 7 years until I was like 18 years old.
And they were the cool brand to be on at that point. Armada was as well. But Line was like Jason Leventhal's company that eventually got bought, but they always had that kind of new school cachet to them. And then the whole world of skiing at that point was based around new schoolers, it seemed like. Were you on the new schooler site and were you contributing to that as a kid too?
Every once in a while I would post a clip, but I wasn't like, one of the forum writers or anything. I didn't have a huge presence. Definitely knew what it was and used it to like get my name out there a little bit more and try to like get those guys to know who I am. But personally, I didn't have too much going out on there.
Okay. I would think maybe the first guy that you knew, or maybe knew from new schoolers, that made it was Daniel Tishi or Tishi. I can't pronounce his last name, and that's okay. He won the Grom contest when he was like 12 years old. Is that the first time you heard about the TGR comp, is when he won it?
Yeah, totally. That also lit a fire. So I had been competing underneath through IFSA since 7 years old, and then got to like, 13, 14 years old and watched Daniel win that contest and then get the opportunity to shoot with TGR and just like throw down an epic segment super young. And I was like, wow, that's insane. So didn't even know that these film contests were a thing back then until that video came out. And decided the next season to put everything I had into trying to film. And my dad was super supportive and carried the camera around. And we made something cool, but weren't able to take the top spot. We got second. I think Seth Klein won it that year.
Okay.
And then ended up trying again the next season, and then had some really good conditions here locally and got to compete on some cool locations that helped us film. And I won the contest that year, and that's how TGR got to know my name. And it certainly was the start of the current trajectory we're on.
When you pitch it to your dad that first year, not the first year, but the first year you know about it, Daniel wins it and you're like, I'm going to enter this thing next year. Dad, will you be my filmer? And is the goal like, holy shit, I'm going to be in a TGR movie. I just have to win this contest? Because you've seen Daniel ski before. Like, you probably know that you can one-up him if everything lines up.
Yeah, certainly I was psyched on like the opportunity. And then I was also like, if this can come together, then I can probably shoot with the TGR guys. And then after eventually winning the contest, and then in the like contest description, it's like, get the opportunity to shoot with TGR. I did get that opportunity and I went to Jackson Hole, except it literally was just like pouring rain and pure ice and cloudy for like a week and a half straight for the one time that I would have the chance to shoot with them. And they were cool and definitely still sent me out onto the mountains with camera crew, but none of the actual athletes in the TGR film were there or wanted to ski because it was just atrocious conditions. But was still able to do a couple big backflips and shred around the resort, so they knew I could ski. And then none of those shots, I think, ended up ever getting used anywhere, but definitely was just good for getting my foot in the door and getting to meet that crew.
How do you find out that you don't make the movie? Because I would think at that age, you're super excited. You've read the fine print and the clips, they hit the cutting room floor and they're not in the movie. Does that bum you out at 15?
It definitely bummed me out, but I understood because I was like, yeah, these conditions were dog shit. These were not very good, like skiing conditions. And I knew that having skied the way I did, like they'd be psyched to like get to know me a little better and see where the career progresses. But it was definitely a bit of a bummer not getting like an actual segment in the film. And when Daniel did it, it definitely made it look like, oh, this is easy. It just lines up, but that's not the case.
So it's a buzzkill that you don't have any fireworks on the big screen that winning year. But speaking of fireworks, I've also heard that you like to make homemade fireworks. And can you describe your biggest and baddest charge you've ever built?
Yeah. This was part of like the free range parenting thing going on. Is when we were super young, we would buy these fireworks that were so atrociously expensive and then dissect them to try to get some of the black powder out. And we'd spend like hundreds of dollars to build like maybe a tiny little explosion here and there. And my mom eventually was just like, you guys are wasting so much money doing this. I'm just going to buy you some black powder. And there was like a local gun store or like a cannon store here in the Flathead Valley. And my mom went into these guys and was like, yeah, I'm just looking for some black powder. And they're like, oh, no problem. Here you go. And for $20 bought like a freaking case of just pure black powder. They don't even sell it anymore, but this was such an insane thing to have as a little kid that my buddies and I on 4th of July, instead of going out and dissecting all these other fireworks, would go and just build our own little firecrackers and explosions that were definitely a lot bigger than anything you could buy.
What's your best fireworks scenario gone wrong? You had to have done something wrong with that black powder.
Fortunately, never lost any fingers. The most viral moment was actually this last year. I'm still into fireworks, and we taped this like Roman candle to an RC airplane that I had.
Okay.
And we ripped it across the lake as my buddy was paddleboarding, and then we just like dive bombed him as I was shooting these things straight at him as he's out on the water.
Did you get him?
We got him. He fell off the paddleboard, and it was just a super funny moment on 4th of July, and it literally got like 6 million views on Instagram. It was so
no way.
Yeah, I've tried like my whole life to become like this dude that like skis and has like a bit of a social media presence, and my skiing clips do all right here and there, but you just post some fireworks and a dude on a paddleboard and it gets 6 million views. I'm just like, this is ridiculous.
What's your next biggest viewed clip that you have compared to your fireworks on the paddleboarder?
Dude, it's another non-skiing clip. There was this moment last winter after Kings and Queens where we were out in the backcountry ripping around, and on the sled trail, there was this little mouse. And like, I had hesitated to even put it on my Instagram because I was like, this is such a ridiculous clip. But there was a mouse on the snowmobile trail. We picked it up because we like almost ran it over. And then it just like clinged to us and it like crawled around our shirts and like said hello for 15 minutes. And then we were like, all right, dude, you got to go. And we set this mouse down on the ground, and then it starts to like slowly mosey away. And as it's flying or like running away, this bird flies down and grabs it and then flies away with the mouse.
I think I might have seen it.
It was so ridiculous, dude. And yeah, there's lots of controversy in the comments about like you should have put it in the bushes, but we literally just put it back down where we found it in the middle of the snow.
Well, it's like trials of nature. People can say whatever they want, but that mouse is going to get eaten regardless. You know, you just happen to find it and move it, and the bird had to fly somewhere else to get him. So
yeah,
I wouldn't worry about those environmentalists worrying about the animals in Mother Nature. But the TGR contest puts you on the map, but you end up blowing up because of the Quicksilver Young Guns contest. How do you hear about that contest? And do you need a connection with Quicksilver, or is it more anyone can put together an edit as long as they see the contest online?
Yeah, I had just been seeing these clips on social media. I don't even think I knew the contest existed until like halfway through that season. And I had just started to stack some like clips around my resort iPhone that were pretty decent. And there's like a qualifying stage. Back when I competed, it was a little bit different than it is these days. But the social media clips that I put together ended up doing really well. And then I was in the top 10 finalists, and it was like 9 park skiers and then myself as like a backcountry freeride dude that just shredded around the resort. And then until this day, I think one of my best edits I've made was just shooting for that Quicksilver contest, just because the weather and conditions lined up so perfectly for my dad and I to go out and crush in a few days. So I qualified for the finals. You have the rest of the season, and we went to Cook City, I think up to Golden, BC. And then I put the edit together myself in like late April. and then the judging's like online, and people definitely knew my edit stood out. And one thing I think helped it stand out was that they gave you like 4 songs that were copyright free that you were allowed to use.
Okay.
But then also in the fine print, it said, if you have any other copyright free music, feel free to use it. Just it can't be something that's going to get us sued. And my dad and I sleuthed the internet for like a good song that wasn't the same as literally the 9 other edits. So mine was like a little bit less monotonous. It was actually like a cool beat, and it helped it stand out that much more. But then the skiing was decent itself. And yeah, I got a call that I won that contest as we were hanging out in Mexico that spring. And I won right before the very tail end of winter, because then you win a cash prize of 10 grand.
Yeah.
And I won that money, and that was the first money I'd ever made in skiing. And then went and bought all my friends that helped vote for me dinner. And then I bought a plane ticket to Alaska and got to go ski in Haines for the end of the season. And I bought a computer to edit all the footage. And that all helped get my name out there a little bit more. And yeah, it was super cool.
I have so many questions. I'm going to start with Alaska. When you go to Alaska for your first time and you're 17, 18 years old, something like that, is it just mind-blowing? And is it scary or is it exciting? What do you see what do you feel when you see that terrain?
It was incredibly exciting, and then honestly less intimidating as I got up there. Like, it had been built up in my mind for my entire lifetime that it's the gnarliest, biggest skiing that you could ever do in your life.
Right.
That's what I had anticipated, and it certainly is, but like, it's also the most amount of snow and like the longest runouts out of anything else that I've skied. Like, there's not like sketchy trees at the bottom of this like cliff you're trying to hit. So it definitely takes a bit of training to figure out how to scale things, because you think that, oh, that cliff's going to be like 15 feet, and it turns out it's going to be like 50. But other than that, yeah, the terrain and the skiing is just like exactly where I feel at home, and it was super comfortable out there.
How many different places in Alaska have you been to ski?
Early on, like, it was just Haines, Alaska every year. I ended up, that same year I won the Quicksilver contests, I had some opportunities pop up where like Matt Sturbins from Forefront called me, and then like a week later, this heli operation out of Haines called Seba Heli called me, and they all were like, yeah, we saw your skiing. We'd be psyched to work with you. And I got like a deal on heli time. So that helped it go even further when I had the little bit of cash to spend up there. Yeah. So I spent the next like 5 years just skiing Haines, and never specifically shooting for any like big projects, but just getting my name out there a little bit more and getting my own clips here and there. That definitely made me really comfortable in Alaska. And then with TGR the past few years, we went to Juneau, Alaska last year. And then from there, this season, we went up to Palmer, AK.
Are any of those places more gnarly than the other? Like, this is another level up, or are they all pretty the same level?
There's definitely different types of skiing. The skiing I've gotten to do in Haines is for sure the gnarliest, and like has the most amount of wild, twisted terrain that's just like coliseums of just stacked like sandcastles of crazy spines. And then last year skiing in Palmer, like, it was a really thin snow year, so that added its own element, and it was definitely a bit more intimidating because you weren't sure if the snow conditions were going to like lend itself perfectly to your skiing the whole way down, or if you were going to run into rock or ice and then have some exposure below you. So it might have been a little more intimidating last year, even though some of the terrain we were skiing wasn't as gnarly as up in Haines.
Okay. Now I'm going to go back to your Quicksilver winning edit. With that one, the funny thing about it is you managed to piss off what should have been like a longtime sponsor of yours, your home mountain of Whitefish. What did you do that pissed them off so much?
Yeah, so that was prior to winning the contest, but like certainly a big part of how I got accepted into the finals was there's this old chairlift that is no longer at Whitefish Mountain Resort. It's still a big mountain to me. The hill had this chairlift that was just like decommissioned. It ran like twice a year if it got super busy. And there was this off ramp where it unloaded like mid mountain, and it always looked like the optimal takeoff. And there had never been any close signs. And they typically, although there weren't any close signs, would like park the chairlift so it would like block you from ever trying to jump it. Yeah, that season and that day, somehow it perfectly lined up where I had been shredding around the hill all day, and I just skied by and I was like, wow, that looks like it kind of goes right now. And yeah, kind of like Candide GoPro moment, was just able to shred down midline and air off this chairlift terminal. And it was like 130 feet. I aired past 3 chairlift towers and then had this like tiny little micro tranny that I was able to snipe. And I did it 3 times. I didn't land it till the 3rd time because it was like kind of flat, but worked out really well. And then that clip on Instagram was like the first thing that kind of like started to gain some recognition and go a little bit viral. And then the local ski hill was just like so pissed, and the management was just like, you have to take this video down. We can't support this. You're not allowed to do that. But I didn't break any rules, so they couldn't actually pull my pass. They like red carded it, and I had to go like talk to their management, and they asked me to take the video down. I was like, dude, this is nothing but good publicity. It's not going to like inspire anyone to go and probably do the same thing because it was a dumb idea, but it worked out.
Right.
And then the local community of Whitefish was a huge fan, and like I had a great support from everyone down here, but the ski hill was just like completely anti-cool, and they did not like that.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and even before Outdoor Research started sponsoring this podcast, I was rocking a lot of their gear, because nothing else I've used before holds up in the brutal weather that the Pacific Northwest delivers. Everywhere you go in the PNW, you're going to see a ton of OR gear, and that's because the locals know that while other brands may spend a lot more marketing dollars, OR keeps you drier and warmer every time, and that's what it's all about. Well, it's also about looking good, and while OR used to be all about technical mountaineering gear, and they still do that, they've changed a bit. They've hired new designers and partnered with some of the most incredible athletes in ski and snowboard, like backcountry legend Mark Abma, world champion freeskier Troy Podmilsack, X Games gold medalist Zoe Atkin, and snowboarder Neil Provo, who are making sure the new fits look as good as they perform in the elements. You can check out all things OR over at outdoorresearch.com, and when you check out, enter the code SNOW25, that's all caps and the number 25 with no spaces, and I'm going to save you 25% off your order. Sale items and pro products are excluded. My final sponsor, and one that's a daily driver for me, is Best Day Brewing. They are hands down the best flavors in non-alcoholic beer. That's right, life isn't all about drinking too much. It's all about having your best days ever, and to do that, you need something that won't slow you down. That's where Best Day comes into play. It has all the flavor of your alcoholic beer, but none of the alcohol, meaning you can have a few, and then you can drive yourself, your kids, you can drive anyone anywhere because you're going to be clear-headed and ready to go. I'm not telling everyone to quit drinking alcohol altogether. Sure, a few beers can be fun, but now, when I drink alcoholic beer, I mix a few Best Days in to make sure that I'm not that guy. You know what I'm talking about. And if you're cutting out alcohol completely, congrats. Finding Best Day will make that easier than ever. And coming in at less than 75 calories, you won't be packing on the pounds like your regular IPAs do. Best Day is brewed for the doers of winter. The skiers, the snowboarders, the snowmobilers, the sled doggers, the ski bladers, the splitboarders, the racers, the snowshoers, and everyone in between. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day. And if you can't find it at the store, you can always go to bestdaybrewing.com or find it on Amazon. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast.
What I think is funny is you eventually get sponsored by Moonlight Basin, and they almost laugh at the shit that you're doing at Whitefish and realize, hey, we're going to sponsor this kid because he's our type of skier.
Yeah, no, it was a super funny moment where like that same season, when I was 17, I had like all these things fall into place where I like won that contest, met new people, and then, got kicked off Whitefish, but then was skiing Big Sky, and then like met the CEO of Cross Harbor, which runs all these different resorts out of Big Sky. And they were just like, oh, we have Scot Schmidt over here at the Yellowstone Club. And then they had just brought on Bodie Miller for the Spanish Peaks Club, and they were looking for another athlete to join Moonlight Basin. And I was just this like young kid that was just like starting to make a name for himself. And they were like, how about you come work for us? And turned into an epic non-endemic partner that I had never seen coming from 1,000 miles away. But definitely super supportive.
Do you get to make turns with Bodie and Scot Schmidt on different occasions?
Yeah, Scott, epic dude, still rips, and I haven't yet skied with Bodie. My dad's been mountain biking with him a couple times, and he like took him on one of his trails they built, and Bodie was like way too into it and like overshot something and pile drove his face into the ground. But it's cool because those guys are definitely, there is a presence of them being around the Big Sky community, and you get to see them every now and then.
When you think about you coming up, like what were the skiers that you had posters of on your wall? And did you ever get to ski with any of those dudes at your mountain?
As far as icons when I was younger, I didn't ever get to ski with any of the dudes that were like on my wall at a young age. I remember Andy Mahre and Lindsay Dyer came to Whitefish one time, and we got to shred around with them, which was super sick. And then now it's cool because I just kind of know Lindsay, and she hangs out over in Jackson and go to all the same avalanche training workshops together in the fall. But it was, at a young age, not really any of the people that I had looked up to really would come and ski our local hill. So it wasn't until recently that I got to go out and ski with them.
I guess Montana was really out of the way for a lot of people. If it wasn't like Utah, it wasn't Colorado, it seemed like it was almost a hassle to get there. And the only hassle that people were willing to sacrifice for was Jackson, it seemed like.
Yeah, totally.
So the contest is huge for you because while you got on the people's radars with TGR, this Quicksilver one gets you on a lot more people's radars. Like you said, you got a call from Sturbans. Is this kind of when you leave Line and go to BD? Is it in this time that the transition happens?
No, I still skied with Line for another few years until, honestly, I can't get the dates right. Maybe that was it. So I won the Quicksilver contest, and then that really put me on TGR's radar. So the next season they wanted to film together, but you need partners associated with the film.
Yep.
So then I joined Outdoor Research and had a great couple years with them. And maybe at that same time, I had the opportunity, Johnny Collinson lined me up with Black Diamond because they wanted to try to push making a free ride ski again. And then that all lined up in order for me to start filming with TGR the next year. And I think I did part ways with Line.
With Black Diamond, there was a period in their history where I think it was the first time around that they went to make skis where they made them and they weren't that good. Everybody that I talked to that skied on BD skis were paid to ski on BD skis, and they would say nice things about them until I talked to them secretly, and then they'd be like, oh man, these skis suck, but I've got a good ski sponsor and it's a great brand. They just need to figure out the ski part. When you got on BD, were the skis better?
I think they may have been better, but they definitely were not up to par. And I definitely had the original goal of working with those guys to help create something that then a year or two down the line we would release that would be super sick. And whether it was management or just the amount of turnover in all these big companies, it just never came to fruition, which was really unfortunate to see. And as I had just started to maybe see a glimmer of hope again towards the end of last season, it had just been 4 years of signing the same contract and not having that actual sick charging ski come to market yet. And then I had the opportunity to jump over to Scot and then backcountry, and that just lined up with my current career paths way better than just staying with one brand.
Is Scot on board with TGR and backcountry as well? So you've got a lot of budget going to that movie?
Yeah, I've got 2 different brands supporting the film now. And then as far as myself as an athlete, just Scot selling mountain bikes is a huge part of why I considered it. And then their skis are also insane. And we're working on a super sick backcountry freeride playful POW ski right now too, which is going to be different than anything they've ever released.
And they're involving you? You're actually going to Europe and being able to sit down with engineers and talk to them about the specs of the ski?
Yeah, it was incredible. After starting this conversation with those guys last year, I had worked with brands before, but never anyone overseas. And yeah, they just jumped me on a plane. I flew over their insane headquarters in Switzerland and then got to meet all these guys that are designing the ski, and they showed me the factory and take input that I've given them throughout the last season and then now put it into the new ski I'm going to be trying this season. So yeah, it's been really fun to work with them, and they're really hands-on and super, super fun to work with.
Then backcountry is an interesting one because I'm guessing with them, is that all your outerwear and everything else pretty much?
Yeah, so Scot originally wanted to be able to sign me head to toe, but then ended up having the opportunity to join backcountry. So just worked with Scot for backpacks, helmets, goggles, and skis. And then backcountry is just full outerwear and undergarments and everything.
That's an interesting one to me because not that I have a problem with it by any means, but it's interesting when a retailer takes the position as a vendor. I mean, is it weird going with a brand that used to compete with Black Diamond or that used to not compete with Black Diamond? Backcountry used to sell Black Diamond, and now you're with a Black Diamond competitor, but it's all within the same house. Is it all confusing at all, or is it whatever?
It's a little bit confusing. It does seem to have helped them make really cool product, though. I think them being a distributor for all these other brands for years enabled them to kind of see what sells well and what doesn't, and then also what quality stuff is worth pursuing.
Yeah, it's cheating in the R&D of it.
It's definitely cheating, but they figured it out, and it's been really cool.
It's kind of why people in the beginning in action sports and everywhere in sports really hated Amazon in the beginning, because Amazon told people, hey, you can list your products with us. We're going to show them on the first page of search. And Amazon pretty much just looked at it as a data center. They built 5 years worth of data. Then they were like, all right, this is what's selling. We're going to start buying product and selling it. And we're going to take the first page of search. And then all those dealers that Amazon made it seem like they were dangling a carrot to got screwed. So it's an interesting thing. And for an athlete, I mean, you're with a place that's always going to sell, because even if people aren't buying backcountry jackets, they're going to be buying jackets from somebody else and backcountry's going to sell them. So I feel like there is some safety there. Then thinking of TGR, because that's the people that have made you famous almost, given you've done it yourself with your skiing. But when do you get the first big call, phone call, hey, we've got a trip. It's a real trip with some athletes and yourself and a filmer, and you're going to make the movie. When do you get that first home run phone call?
Yeah, so that was back when I was 18. And then year after I had won the Quicksilver contest and knew I had some partner affiliation with TGR, but didn't have any sort of game plan going into the winter of when I was going to get to work with them, until I literally got a phone call mid-February, and they were putting a crew together to go on a trip up in Terrace, BC. And that was with Tim Durchie, Coulter Hinchcliffe, and then a really solid production team. And we had marginal conditions, but cool experience up there. And it was the first time that I had done the full TGR production side of things, which was really cool to experience. And I just had no like idea how all that worked. And it was the first call was to go to Terrace, BC at 18.
When you're a rookie with the TGR crew, do they give you any shit being the rookie? Are there any like dues to be paid, or is it just all good times and learning?
It was definitely the funny experience because I was 18 and those guys are all like 30 at that point.
Right.
And they were definitely not afraid to show me all the debauchery that goes on in there. But they like welcomed me like a new member of the family, but I definitely had to just accept the way that things were rather than being able to speak my mind. And I was just a little kid at that point, and they didn't really maybe believe that I had the experience to go out and do the things that I knew I could. But it was a fun moment, and it definitely was a good learning experience.
Well, the beauty of these trips for a kid like you is not everybody knows your backstory. They don't know that your dad's been taking you out in the backcountry since you were 7 years old and that you can hang with just about anybody in the world. So that has to feel pretty good when you're able to go on one of those trips and represent yourself and not embarrass yourself at all. Do you end up starstruck on any of these trips in the beginning when you're going with like the Sages and the Ian McIntoshes and stuff like that?
Yeah, I certainly was, especially like back on that first trip with Tim Durkee. I was just like, wow, these are like the guys. I can't believe I'm here right now. And then as you get to meet these people and hang out with them, you just realize that everyone's a person. And that if you just like have that mentality going into everything, I feel like becoming starstruck is way less often the case. And you're just like noticing that these are just normal people trying to continue living their childhood dream of being professional skiers. So it was definitely how I looked at it. It was just like starstruck at first and then realized, oh, actually, these are just normal people.
So what skiers today, if you were to happen to just walk into a random bar and there they were and it's you and them in a bar, which one would make you nervous to go up to and be like, hi, I'm Parkin?
I don't know. The other day I got to meet Mark Abma at the Coast Film Festival, and I'd never been introduced to him before. So that was a really cool experience.
I heard everyone got COVID there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I heard a lot of people got COVID there.
Oh, fortunately, I didn't get sick there. I got my booster right before I went, so
How good for you.
it probably helped me out. But yeah, that was a super cool event, and definitely was like a little bit intimidated going up to him. He's just an icon. But then all of a sudden you get to chat with him, and he's just like, keep the dream alive, dude. Yeah, we're just pursuing the same things they did 15 years ago.
He was doing it in 2003, and he's doing it in 2023, which is insane.
Yeah.
The last big event that helped build your name, I mean, your name was already built, but then the King and Queens of Corbets comes around. You end up winning that one in 2020. Do you remember seeing Corbets that first time you went to Jackson when you were like 16 years old? And was it something that you're like, I will never hook myself off of this?
Yeah, at that point, like the Kings and Queens event wasn't even happening.
Right, exactly.
I had never like considered trying to air way off the top of it. And then it was also closed, so I couldn't even ski it publicly because it was just like raining and icy. But it was definitely something I stared at, and I knew I wanted to ski it at some point just because it was so iconic. As far as thinking one day that we would start building jumps into the top of that and it would be a big part of my career, I had no idea at that point.
The night before you win the contest, had you already decided you were going to throw a double? And do you tell anyone, or is that something you just keep close to the vest?
Yeah, it was just Jake and I. So Jake Hopfinger and I think I had competed in it the season before and then did a big backflip in and then tried to double down in the middle and landed on my face, kind of rode out of it, but definitely didn't get the run down that I had planned. And then going into it the next season, and I had Jake there to like help try to figure out how we were going to do this together. It was fully like the night before a plan of ours, and we had considered like, what if we build a takeoff further back from the lip of the drop in so we don't miss the sweet spot and you're able to like actually land it rather than just splatting in the middle of the couloir.
Right.
So that was a lot of forethought. And then finally at like 11 p.m. the night before, we're like, all right, dude, we're doing it.
How do you even go to sleep the night before knowing that you're going to go through that risk the next day, where I'm sure you're confident and you believe in yourself, but that's got to be one of the biggest things you've teed up and you've got a whole lot of time to think about it.
Yeah, probably didn't get enough sleep that night. And it was just a lot of like replaying it over and over and trying to figure out how you're going to do this. But I often get like a little like intimidated about the things that I think that I'll probably do in the future or that I've done in the past. And then I just try to think about currently now. I'm not hooking into Corbets, like that's a tomorrow thing. So you just get some sleep. Once you get up there tomorrow, you'll suss it out. If you feel confident, then it's actually the right time to send it.
When you're at an event like that, and it's like a who's who of skiing between everybody who's competing and snowboarding as well, all the TGR people that live there, the crowd is a who's who of skiing. And does that put even more pressure on you as like you want to stick out, but like in a good way at that venue?
Yeah, especially that year. Like it was absolutely insane. I think A-Hall was there, and then like Sam Cooch was there. Crazy Carl was sending it again, and Jake and the rest of the people that were skiing were just like top of the industry as far as backcountry freeride goes. And You definitely want to stand out, but you also don't want to make a fool of yourself by just like hucking something that's obviously not going to come around to your feet. So yeah, there was a lot of thought that went into it prior to actually committing to it. And then there was all the like positivity and stoke up there. Like everyone's super psyched on like supporting one another, which is really cool. And especially having the snowboarders in the same field as skiers, it just like the camaraderie is unlike any other event I've ever been a part of.
The King and Queens of Corbett, it's a short contest. You get maybe 2-3 hits throughout the whole event itself. But it's one of those that gets millions of hits online and makes yourself a household name. Do all your contracts and everything start creeping up once that hits and everybody realizes you're going to get more exposure than they ever thought possible?
Yeah, certainly that event helped put my name more on the map and has helped secure some better contracts. And then working with TGR has been a big part of that. And then, yeah, I think just continually trying to be unique and getting more content out than what you thought you might get done the season before has definitely helped me land better contracts over the years.
When you think about the brands that pay you money to ski today, not give you free product, what's your list?
As far as who's paying me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got the super unreal non-endemic partner, Moonlight Basin. Got a little bit of income from them. And then Backcountry, Scott. I think it's just those three right now. And then I do have a bit of a deal with Polaris where I'm not paid, but I get really good deals on snowmobiles. So then I can kind of sell those and get a bit of cash flow the next season, which is really cool.
So you have 3 major sponsors. I mean, can you make over 50, 60 grand a year being a skier?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
It's definitely been like a slow upwards trajectory, but we're getting to the point where now I can, fully sustain myself. And I had like the goal of by the end of high school, if I can support myself doing this, then you're going to be able to avoid college. And right as I graduated high school and I had the seasons that I did, I was 17, 18 years old and then had enough income to support myself. So I was like, all right, you're going to keep pursuing this for the time being. And then, it's worked out really well.
So it's nice that your parents don't have to worry about you, that you're able to be self-supportive of yourself in the ski world. But what I think is interesting for you is you almost have to worry about your parents a little bit. I know for me, when I was your age, my dad was not out there dropping crazy shit, and I never had to worry about my dad. But you've been on the same mountain at the same time as your dad, not knowing it, and your dad like broke his hip or maybe his pelvis.
Broke his pelvis. Yeah, his iliac crest. That was super gnarly. I was just shredding around Big Sky for an afternoon and then knew my dad was there, but had just planned on linking up for dinner or something that evening. And then I got a phone call. I don't even think it was from him. It was from someone else. They were like, dude, your dad's in the ambulance right now. They're heading to Life Flight. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And they literally like ambulanced him to the Big Sky Hospital, Life Flighted to Bozeman, and then like instantly Life Flighted to Seattle because he broke his pelvis in an area that no one in Bozeman could operate on. And then he also had like a gaping wound that was open to the environment. So they really wanted to operate on him like right away.
Oh man.
So it was like a crazy quick get off the resort, bump over to Seattle, get surgery. And I just was skiing around the hill and heard that he had like gone over a crest and it's a pretty rocky place and ended up like getting a core shot on one of his skis that then like threw him forward and double ejected. And then his hips just like hit a boulder that were like 20 feet down below him. And he is a pretty tough guy. He tried to stand up, he said, and then he just felt some like crunching in his waist. And he's like, all right, yeah, I'm pretty hurt. And then you mentioned most people probably don't have to worry about their parents. My dad is just nonstop sending it, whether it's at the bike park that we're building, like breaking his wrist on a new drop, or when I was younger and he's still racing mountain bikes and just like shattering his legs and puncturing his lung. Like pretty often I'm like wondering if my dad's about to hurt himself or if he has already hurt himself.
All right. Well, that's pretty much the podcast. At this point, it's something that I call Inappropriate Questions. And I was able to get a great friend of yours, a TGR athlete, a guy you made a short film about bank robberies and skiing with, another badass Jacob Hopfinger to come up with 3 inappropriate questions. And while some people are kind of reserved when they come up with these questions, Jake was more like, hell yeah, I'll throw Parkin under the bus, which is really what I want to hear when I'm asking about inappropriate questions. So are you ready for question number 1 from Jake?
I'm certainly interested. Let's see what he had.
All right, here we go.
Parkin Costain. Hope the podcast is going well. I got some questions for you, buddy. Tell us about that epic morning in January in Cook City, Montana, when we ran into some big dog snowboarders and what followed with that.
Oh my God. Yeah, I forgot about this moment. It's kind of out there on the internet, but like barely. So this is going to be good. We were filming with the Benchy Creative crew on our first like bigger self-produced project called Dollar Short.
Okay.
And we had been, like working together early season and conditions weren't lining up. It hadn't like snowed anywhere for a while. So like all the zones locally were skied. And then in Cook City, like pretty much everything had been tapped. And literally, like, so many crews go to that zone now that we were like at the bottom of stuff, and it was like, there's literally nowhere for us to ski that's not already skied. And we just decided to leave, head back to the cars for that afternoon. And along the way, we like saw these jumps up on like a ridge line that were pretty prominent, but already had a ton of tracks below them. And we wanted to go over and check them out. So the rest of the crew ventured up on top of this plateau. And then I went down below this plateau and just was like staring up at these landings that looked like in the last couple of days, a couple snowboarders had been sending some big jumps and landing on this pretty interesting face because it was a plateau. So they had to like snowmobile tow into it.
Okay.
And I just had never like seen anyone in this area do that before. But got to the bottom of this hill. Obviously, everything had already been landed on. I was just like, wow, even more zones have just been tapped. And I wrapped around the corner and there was like one track. And I just used it to high mark up this slope and get some traction and like come over the top of the plateau to meet the rest of my buddies. And turns out that one track was at the bottom of a freshly built jump of Bodie Merrill, Nils Mendich, and like the rest of this huge big dog snowboard crew. And I high marked up to the top of this thing, like hit some rocks on the snowmobile, fell off, didn't see that I was sitting in front of a huge cheese wedge, and then like got up and turned around and I see my crew and I'm like, dude, the zone is clapped. And then I see the rest of this snowboard crew just like literally you could see like fire coming out of their eyes. Like they were just like losing their mind. And all of a sudden they're like, break his skis. And like everyone was just literally like the tensions had all built up to this one moment. It was just like the worst thing that could have possibly ever happened. And there was at that point nothing we could do. Like I had just literally high marked straight up the middle of their landing.
Right.
And we just said we're sorry and shamefully snowmobiled away. And then that evening I got some pretty aggressive DMs, but since then we've made it all up. I bought the guys dinner in Alaska last year, and yeah, it's all under the rug now.
Well, you're way younger than those guys. They can expect young guys to make mistakes here and there. I mean, Bodie Merrill's been around forever.
Yeah, it was unreal.
All right, we'll go to question number 2.
Parkin, you've really been kind of getting your head out there and getting into the worldwide dating network. So maybe fill in the blank and tell us how it's going.
So I hear you're using different dating apps, you're meeting people in bars, you're pretty much doing everything you possibly can to meet different women, and I'm going to assume it's women because I guess I really shouldn't assume, but I will in this case. And what has been the most successful dating app or dating practice that you've been using lately? What's the layup?
Yeah, so the layup, so I did a podcast 8 months ago, and at that point had no dating apps, had pretty non-existent love life. I had been in a 5-year-long relationship and just was content. But then we cut things off and I was in this career that I was just fully focused on. But not too long ago, got this dating app called Raya, and it's worked out pretty well. I just was over in New York and met some really cool girls. And then besides Raya, though, I've never had any other experience in dating apps. But this one, there's some really cool girls on there and it's going well.
Do you have to pay to be part of Raya?
It's a monthly subscription. It's $20, dude. It's kind of steep.
Well, I mean, if it works, it works. With Raya and the girls that you've met, are you taking these girls out on multiple dates, or is it kind of like one night stand territory?
No, multiple dates. Like, dude, I'm trying to find love. I'm not just there to hook up. You know, we're just trying to find a connection, and haven't found the one yet, but certainly met some really cool people and honestly some good business connections. So yeah, we'll see where I take things.
All right. Well, in the intro and outro of a bunch of these podcasts, I'm going to try to find you love, because I'm sure there's someone out there that listens to this podcast that would love to love you. But we don't need to find that right now. We're going to go to question number 3.
All right, Parkin. So it was a few years ago. We were going up to Alaska. We were going to Haines. I was somewhere in the Northwest. I was going to fly up to Haines and meet you guys. We were flying with Seba, Helly. You guys were driving. We were going to bring the sleds. You were with our great buddy, Alex D'Agostino. Tell us about what went down at the border in Eureka, Montana with my sled in particular, rather what was inside my sled.
Border stories.
Yeah, this one was freaking ridiculous. Jake really set us up. It was unfortunate. It was middle of COVID, so it was already incredibly tough to get across the border.
Okay.
But we were trying to go up to Haines, Alaska for like the whole month of April, and we wanted to have our sleds so when we weren't Helene, we could go and try to like find some terrain much more efficiently and not spend as much money. And my buddy Alex and I that were helping, he was like the main producer of the film, decided to drive Jake's sled, my sled, and one other all the way across Canada through the Yukon and up into Haines. And Montana's really close to the border. We were going to go through Eureka, but for some reason ended up going over to one other side of Montana. There's all these different border crossings. And first off, it was middle of COVID. the amount of paperwork that you needed to have to cross the border at that point was absolutely ridiculous. And they just didn't want you to get across. So even if you had all the paperwork, they just like made you sit in this office for like 3 hours, then would call you up, make you sign something, and then send you back. And it took us like 7 hours to even like start to get across the border. And then they do a final like vehicle inspection and like sleuth through everything that you have and make sure that you're not bringing any paraphernalia up.
Okay.
And as soon as that topic came up, I thought about it and I was like, I guarantee you Jake still has this like little smoke pin in his sled that I had seen not too long ago. And then it was insane because that same moment, we have this big truck full of tons of gear, full sled trailer, and there was this little woman driving from Canada into the US, and they found a vape pen. And on the spot, she had this like puppy. They just like locked it in the room. We saw her get her Miranda rights read to her. They put her in handcuffs and then took her into this like cage.
Oh no.
Like, oh my God. And then literally sat there as these dudes slowly sleuthed from front to back of the truck all the way through like all the luggage into the sled trailer. And eventually got to Jake's sled and I was like, Alex, they're going to find it. And they found, Jake's little doolad. And they were just like, you guys know what this is? And we're like, yeah, really sorry that's in there. And then these Canadian dudes just handed it back to us and said, you promise you'll throw it out the window? And then just let us go. And we were just like, no freaking way, dude. That was unreal. Because going into the US, this woman just fully got arrested. She was like 60 years old. And then we're two like 20 or somethings. And they just handed it back to us and let us throw it out the window.
Yeah, and told you to litter. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was insane.
All right, man. Well, that's Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast. And looking at your life and times, you really were born into this. But to make a career like the one that you've built, like to make all these things happen, it takes making all the right decisions and putting in the work and having the passion. And that's what's so cool about your path is, while it probably wasn't that easy to put everything together, all the pieces were laid out there right in front of you. Your parents pretty much set it all up for you, and then these contests were laid out in front of you, and all you had to do was figure out what you wanted to do with them, and then stay in the direction your parents put you in, listen to their guidance, and have the stoke that you have for being in the mountains, and you're able to accomplish all your dreams, and you're still only like 25 years old, so we're going to be seeing you for like another 15 years doing this.
24,
my bad. And it's been really cool to watch you blow up this whole career in such a short amount of time. And I thank you for telling your story, and I thank you for your time, man.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. This was super fun.
So that was time with Parkin Costain, and his skiing speaks for itself. He's one of those pro skiers who's been sending since he was just a little kid in the backcountry with his dad. And yeah, he made it to pro skiing, and that's rad. But what's even cooler to me is how important his dad was to making his dreams come true. I can only dream of having that kind of impact and connection with my kid, and we're really tight. So that's a really special thing, and that's the show for this week. And at this point, it's time for the first review of the week in a while. It comes from Flashing Freak. It's a 5-star review titled Refreshingly Brutal. I stumbled upon this podcast about a year ago and have really enjoyed it. I've been in the industry for 25 years, and I love the brutal questions that are asked from time to time about what people earn, bad decisions that were made, good times, etc. The industry is full of super passionate people, which are its greatest asset. Mike Powell is one of them. Thanks for digging into real people's stories. Well, thank you very much for that review, Flashing Freak. I really love asking those brutal questions. I mean, there's a ton of podcasts out there, and there's a lot of fluff out there. And really, I want to get the real story for you so you can understand who these people really are. And while some questions are tough, it's gotten to the point where I can ask anything now. I am confident in my ability to research everything and know that I'm not being a dick to someone. I'm just trying to get the information out there so that the listeners can enjoy the podcast and learn the most about the person. I will say, none of my questions are ever to make a person look bad. If they've done bad stuff, sure, I'm going to ask about it, but really, I'm not here to paint a person into a corner. I'm just here to tell the story. So thank you for that review. Please email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com, and I'll send you a limited edition Powell Movement something, and it will be awesome. For everyone else, please review the show wherever you listen. And if I read your review on the podcast, you'll be a winner. If you have an iPhone, I'm going to tell you exactly how to do this. If you have any other phone, well, you're going to have to figure it out on your own, but I'm sure you're smarter than me and you can do that. But iPhone owners, here's what you need to do. 1, hit the podcast icon on your iPhone. I believe it's purple. 2, search for the Powell Movement. And even if you already subscribe, you still need to do this. 3rd, click my logo. 4th, scroll down to where you see the stars. And your final step, star rate me and review the podcast. Thanks for taking the 30 seconds to do that, and thank you for listening. And finally, please support the brands that make this show happen. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.